There we go. Once again, welcome to Behind the Mic and another week with two interviews with two great sportscasters this week here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson back with you, your host once again. We're going to talk a whole bunch of things here tonight with a couple of different people. I'm excited to bring to you tonight a lot of hockey tonight with both of our guests. First, in our first couple of segments here, we're going to bring in JAKE BASKIN, who is a rising young play-by-play broadcaster from Dean College in Massachusetts, where he has done play-by-play at a few different spots in college and junior hockey. Has also done some college baseball while being a sports broadcasting student at Dean College. We'll talk to him about his experience, what got him into the business, and some of his experiences so far. And then we'll get into some of the news of the day around the NHL and news of the week, really. The main topic being the NHL on TNT announcing their talent roster for the upcoming season, as well as expanding that into talking about the ESPN deal, having the rights, and what the coming season is going to look like. And then we'll also talk about some news that broke here earlier today with Jim Houston reportedly not returning to Hockey Night in Canada for the upcoming season. The great Jim Houston, who's done games nationally, has done games for the Vancouver Canucks, for the Maple Leafs, and of course spent a little bit of time as well earlier in his career with the Toronto broadcasting games of the Toronto Blue Jays. And Jake has a keen interest in that, so we'll talk to him about that as well. So that is the first half of our show, and in the second half, we're excited to be joined by Daniella Pontechelli, who is the new play-by-play voice for the University of Saskatchewan women's hockey program. This week, they announced that their full slate of women's hockey games this upcoming season will be covered on the new Husky fan app, and also a game of the week will be broadcast on the radio in Saskatchewan. Daniella gets the job. She's previously done some reporting work on Saskatchewan Rush National Lacrosse League broadcasts, and she gets the play nod at Saskatchewan women's hockey. So we'll talk to her about that and get into a little bit of her story and get to know her as well. So once again, thanks for joining us. And before we go to our first break and bring in JAKE BASKIN on the other side, we will remind you that you can follow all of our shows and archives here of Behind the Mic and all of our other shows across the ASTV network and our live game broadcasts at the website astvproductions.com, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So thanks again for joining us. We're getting set for a fun hour of hockey talk and broadcaster shop talk. Jonathan Hodgson with you for the next hour. We're going to go to our first break, and on the other side, I will be joined by Jake Baskin here on Behind the Mic. And again, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson with you, joined now by our first guest on the evening. It's Jake Baskin from Dean College in Massachusetts. Jake, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, it's good to be on here. I don't usually get to talk about my own broadcasting career, so this is kind of nice.
And that's kind of where this whole thing came from, is that we don't usually get the chance to talk too much about ourselves, but this is a great opportunity for sportscasters to share our stories and kind of shop talk with each other. So it's been a fun project. So we appreciate you coming on. I know that you have some thoughts about some developments in the NHL broadcasting world the last week or so. We'll get into those as time goes on. But I just kind of want to set the scene a little bit, and so let us know kind of where you're joining us from today, and kind of what's your routine look like right now.
Well, right now I'm in my dorm room at Dean College in Franklin, Massachusetts. I am getting prepared for a weekend of broadcasting. I have a volleyball game and a field hockey game at Amherst College in Western Mass this weekend for Northeast Sports Network, who I'm in my third season working for. I've done 11 different sports for them. And then after that, Sunday afternoon, I'm going to Attleboro, Massachusetts to call the Northeast Generals NA3HL game. I'll be alongside another Dean student, Jake Kelly, on that. It's a pretty busy time for me during the school year on the weekends, and I love doing it. I also this summer was working in summer collegiate baseball in White River Junction, Vermont for the Upper Valley Knighthawks, which is probably the greatest broadcasting experience I've ever had, being able to follow a team around like that and ride the bus with the guys. I love all of them. But also I'm learning about broadcasting at Dean, and I'm just kind of a nerd about it. I love monitoring changes in broadcasting teams and the history of this, who called which event. It's really just something I've taken a lot of interest in. And if I weren't trying to pursue broadcasting myself, I'd probably try to be kind of like an Andrew Marchand type of sports media reporter.
Nice. So who or what was it that kind of instilled that in you? What turned you into a sportscasting junkie?
Well, I mean, it seems like something I've always wanted to do. I always, I'm from a very short-statured family, so we were not particularly athletic. And one of the things I did a lot with my time, big sports fan, I'd watch ESPN Classic back when that had more cultural relevance in the States. And I'd watch all these old games, and, they were all really cool to me. So I have a big passion for the history of the sport. And it was around that time I was also, 9, 10 years old, starting to watch a lot of live games. So I found a lot of favorite announcers to choose from, so like John Miller on Sunday Night Baseball, or Mike Breen was just starting with the NBA at that time, Jim Lampley on HBO Boxing. All of those would be my favorites at that time, and in the time since, I've picked up a lot of other announcers who I have come to really enjoy.
Yeah, we're in a really interesting spot right now with a lot of those broadcasters you just brought up, the John Miller types. Those were the types that kind of got me introduced into sportscasting, and baseball as my background before I was introduced into hockey starting a few years ago. So I came up with, I mean, Vin Scully is the be all end all for baseball. But now we're in a really interesting spot across all sports where I guess you could call them the next generation is coming in with their different styles. But it sounds different, but there's a lot of really uh, talented people coming up through this next wave. So it's going to be fun to watch. But would it be safe to say that hockey's your number one?
Yeah, hockey is my favorite sport, along with various combat sports that I haven't had a chance to call yet. But hockey is, and I found that it's more of a strategic choice. It is my favorite sport, but I realize that there are a lot of people who grow up wanting to do baseball, a lot of people who grow up wanting to do basketball, and I love those sports. But I think I see I guess, an easier path in if I master the hockey route. And I do a lot of other sports too. They're like, I love calling volleyball, swimming, lacrosse, all that. But I'm really gonna see where this all takes me. But it seems like hockey is a good path forward for me. And having done my podcast where I interview other hockey announcers, a shot and a goal. Now I've stopped doing that, but I've really come to try and make connections with those people, and I guess I'm gonna try and break into it with a full-time job next year.
Yeah, and that's really what it's all about in this business is the networking and the relationships, and some of the finest people you're ever going to find are in this business. But I like what you bring up there. You brought up earlier that you've done, I think you said 11 different sports for the Northeast Sports Network. And we're going to talk hockey here as the next 20 minutes or so goes along. But I kind of wanted to ask you kind of a shop talk type question with the experience of 11 different sports. And I'll just use the example of the two that we brought up already, the hockey and the baseball, because I know those are two very different sports to call, and those are both sports that I have experience in. But when you expand it out to the 11 that you've already called, how is that experience going from sport to sport, and what are some of the stark differences you've come across between the different sports?
Well, I mean, some sports are very fast-paced, hockey, lacrosse, even swimming to some extent, and some of them are, a little bit slower, the baseballs, the softballs, like the stuff like volleyball where you don't really have to say much. And, some people who are great at the faster sports aren't necessarily as good at the slower sports, and vice versa. And I I've really tried to find a way to not call everything the same way. One of my real pet peeves is, to use an example, people who call hockey like soccer, because they are two completely different sports and styles of broadcasting. I have tried my best not to be that way. Although, there are some sports I'm a little less familiar with, but I've tried to pick up knowledge as I've gone along. Obviously, the most important thing is the rules of everything.
For sure. And before we go to our first break here, we're going to have two segments with Jake, and then we'll have Daniella Ponticelli in our second half of our show tonight. But before we go to our first break, Jake, the first topic that I wanted to get in with you tonight, because I know it's important to you. We were talking about some of your influences that you listen to when you were breaking into sports fandom and breaking into the business. One that we haven't brought up yet, but I know it is a big one for you, is Jim Houston. And it broke this morning. Reports, I've only seen the one Twitter report so far, but reports broke that Jim Houston will not return to Hockey Night in Canada for the upcoming season. How did that strike you when you saw that?
God, the thing about Jim Houston, when I was starting to get into hockey, my favorite announcer was Steve Levy, who is coming back with ESPN. But when ESPN lost the rights, I had to look for different ways. And I guess somehow, maybe it was through the video games, maybe it was just through NHL Network simulcasting the Canadian feed, I really gravitated to Jim Houston once I heard him. I really liked his command of the game, the fact he could say more with fewer words, and that he could monitor his excitement, not go completely over the top like someone like Gary Thorne would, but not like stay at the same monotone level the entire time, like some of the other Canadian announcers. I found he had that happy medium, and for me, someone who is not a particularly excitable person, found someone I could really emulate my style after. And I believe my style of broadcasting is a little more Canadian, though the fact I'm born and raised in the United States. I have, although I do love Doc Emmerich, I really have listened to the Canadian feed of the Stanley Cup Finals every year he's been doing it, just because I like him that much. And to see him, I guess, so suddenly out of a job is heartbreaking to me. And I know there are other guys with Sportsnet that I like. I'm a big Chris Cuthbert fan. I'm a big fan of Rick Ball, John Bartlett, those guys. But it's going to be different because Hockey Night in Canada, to me, and I've talked to another bunch of younger, even American announcers who feel the same way. Hockey Night in Canada is not going to feel the same way with Jim Houston out of the picture.
Absolutely, it's going to be a different look for sure. Again, we don't have complete details on the whys of the move and who might fill that seat, but you're right, it's going to have a different look and a different sound next year, and hope all is well with Jim Houston. Appreciate your thoughts and your perspective on that, Jake. We're going to go to our first break here, come back with one more quick segment with Jake, and we'll talk a little bit about the NHL on TNT and ESPN coming up this season. So thanks for watching Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions, and we will be right back with more hockey talk with Jake.
Why go solar? Solar is better than ever. Our revolutionary design and inverter equipment with the latest in solar panel technology for the ultimate in-home and business security. That's right, I said security. Grid security and security of your home are linked. Fortify your future today with a battery backup system. No maintenance, quiet running. Did you know in Manitoba, grid-connected, off-grid, and battery backup systems are 100% right off in the year you purchase for any company or farm? Do you want to back up your internet, keep your tills running, and the lights on? We can install a system that is right for you with battery backup fully capable of taking on all those essential loads and keeping you running. When you call our experts at Evolve Green, ask about getting your free energy audit today. Call or email today to find out what system works best for you. 1-866-5EVOLVE or support@evolvegreen.ca. Also, be sure to check out our website at www.evolvegreen.ca.
Back here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions, Jonathan Hodgson, joined in the first half of our show by Jake Baskin from Dean College, where he's a sports broadcasting student and has called games for the Northeast Sports Network, for the Northeast Generals, and baseball games for the Upper Valley Knighthawks in the NECBL. In the first block, talking a little bit about Jake's journey and experience, talking about Jim Houston, and I can tell you my first exposure to Jim Houston was about a 10-year-old kid or so playing EA Sports. And it was Jim Houston and Don Taylor were the play-by-play crew in that game, and I knew the two of them as the guys on EA Sports NHL for a while until I really got into watching more hockey and found out just how talented they were. And one thing that kind of struck me, Jake, and it kind of ties into what I want to talk about here in this block. Was a lot of the names that you were rattling off were in terms of NHL broadcasters were a lot of people from north of the border in the Chris Cuthberts and them, and of course Jim we talked about, and that really piqued my interest with you being south of the border. And I'm genuinely curious how much effort that takes on your part to get access to all of their games, to study these people that work primarily north of the border. What's the access level to the NHL down there?
It's easier. It's much easier now than like when I was in high school with all like the streams, both legal and not so much. You can always find like an NHL game. Those are, if you know where to look, there are always ways to find NHL games and college games. I try to listen to every broadcaster a couple times a year, both TV and radio in the NHL. But I have found that one of my favorite announcers, maybe my favorite in the NHL at this point, is Rick Ball from the Calgary Flames, who I find to be completely underrated and perhaps underutilized. I don't think a lot of people necessarily know about him, but for me, he is exactly what I want to hear and be in a hockey announcer. And I guess go out of my way, although I'm not a Flames fan, to listen to his calls.
Absolutely, and you're talking to a transplanted Flames fan here, growing up in Alberta and then having moved out to Victoria myself. And Rick Ball has worked in both of those locations, working Canucks games and Flames games in his career. That kind of leads into to what I wanted to talk about here in the second block, was the second bit of news that's come out from the NHL world in terms of broadcasts this week is TNT Turner announced their talent roster for the upcoming season of TNT coverage of the NHL. First year of the new rights deal, and they're part of it with ESPN leading the way. What were your initial thoughts when you saw the talent roster for TNT?
Well, TNT really did bring a lot of NBC's the people they utilize the most. And I think they really hit a home run with their play-by-play talent. Kenny Albert, I think, is the most like a Canadian of any American NHL announcer. He is a great, more reserved, but, able to get excited when he has to kind of thing. He does everything. I have so much respect for Kenny as like a multi-sport guy, but I think hockey is really what he has the most passion for and where he shines the most. And behind him, you have Brendan Burke, who's the next coming of Doc Emmerich. He is a fantastic announcer for the New York Islanders. He makes every game exciting, but he's able to control himself just a bit. He's a younger guy. He's under 40. And I think he definitely has what it takes to be the future voice of hockey in America. And I like the play-by-play announcers ESPN has too, particularly Steve Levy. But I think there's a reasonable argument to be made that TNT got the two best from south of the border in that regard. The analysts, Eddie Olczyk, Darren Pang, Keith Jones. They're all veterans of the U.S. hockey broadcasting scene. I guess I would have kind of liked to see a couple newer or younger names in the game broadcast, but at least I know what I'm getting out of those three.
Yeah, and the other part of that crew that was I'm looking at their studio analyst crew, and they have some different characters in there. There's going to be a lot of diversity and style, I think, with of course Wayne Gretzky and his ability to tell stories like nobody else. And then they also bring on a guy like Paul Bissonnette, a little younger, a little current, maybe a little more abrasive. Also Anson Carter and Rick Tocchet round out the studio analyst crew. But kind of keying on Gretzky and Bissonnette, what are your thoughts about them being in the studio?
Well, I know TNT is trying to recreate inside the NBA with inside the NHL. In Liam McHugh, I think they got a very capable host who can manage the personalities there. I'm actually a little higher on Wayne Gretzky than most people seem to be. A lot of people do view him as kind of vanilla, but for me, listening to him explain hockey, he really has mastered how to explain like what made him in particular good. I do learn things from Wayne Gretzky in a way I don't really learn from other people. The other three, I mean, Anson Carter's an NBC carryover. Rick Tocchet is a coach, and I think you always need a coach in your studio, because that's a more like X's and O's perspective. And I know Tocchet is probably going to get an NHL job fairly soon. But as long as he's there, I know he's good friends with Charles Barkley. I think that's a smart hire for TNT to make, and I think right away he's probably going to be the best of their analysts. Bissonnette, I'm curious about because he has been in a more buttoned-up setting with the Arizona Coyotes, but it sounds to me like he didn't particularly enjoy it, being that buttoned up. I know I don't listen to Spit and Chicklets, but I do realize what they're about, and that's more about like you can tell the stories that you can't tell on television. I'm interested in hearing how he is does in a little more buttoned up setting, because I don't really watch studio feeds of the other teams.
You bring up a great point there that I think they're going to want to have Bissonnette bring out that personality and bring out that color, but you definitely can't go to the same levels that you can on Spit and Chicklets. So that's going to be fun to watch as well. Just a couple of minutes left here before we go to our next break, but I just kind of wanted to broaden out the talk here and kind of get your impressions and your expectations on with the US TV rights changing from NBC to ESPN and Turner. In your estimation, what do you think that they need to do in terms of presenting the game in the league? What does ESPN and TNT need to do to sell the game and to grow the game now south of the border?
Well, with ESPN, I think the thing is the side programming. The one concern I have, and I don't think this is particularly conducive to hockey, but ESPN's broadcasts and other sports have been a little bit too conversational for my tastes. Now, I do think Sean McDonough's a pro. I do think Ray Ferraro and Brian Boucher are two of the best analysts out there, and they really did well to land them. And obviously people like AJ Malesko and Kevin Weeks, who I view very highly. I just don't or fight the urge to make this a conversational program like your baseball or football broadcasts. Call it straight. With Turner, I'm interested in seeing the side programming as well, how the studio show comes in their own. I don't worry about their game broadcast. That'll be fine. But my issue with NBC, as they got exclusive coverage, they had a few things in the early 2010s, but they really didn't do a lot of hockey coverage outside of the games themselves. And I think that's going to be really the way to grow it, and what I particularly enjoy. You can't just leave me just NHL Network to find that out.
Yeah, for sure. Good thoughts there. That'll bring us just about to the end of our time here, Jake. But we really appreciate you hopping on to discuss the developments around the NHL. You brought some good insights to it. Love your passion for the game, for the business, for the people, for the history. This has been a lot of fun for me. Hope you had a good time too. Good luck. Good luck with your studies there at Dean College. Good luck behind the mic and all your different assignments. And thanks again for hopping on with us.
My pleasure, Jonathan. I'll do this anytime you need some news broken, any sport.
Sounds great. All right, we're going to go to one more break here, and we'll be right back on the other side with more Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. We will welcome in Daniella Pontechelli, new play-by-play voice for the University of Saskatchewan women's hockey program. Welcome back again to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson back with you, and joined now by our second guest tonight. It's Daniella Pontechelli, new play-by-play voice for the University of Saskatchewan Huskies women's hockey program. Daniella, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on, and how does that sound?
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Jonathan. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, and news broke. We're thrilled to have you on. News broke this week. You got the role of play-by-play voice for the University of Saskatchewan women's hockey program. Big deal with University of Saskatchewan athletics that we'll get into over the course of the next 20 minutes or so. But your initial reaction and your thoughts right now of having the play-by-play gig for women's hockey for the Huskies.
Well, first of all, the fact that it's here and it's even available is something to be said. Of course, this is historic, a private broadcaster taking on a full season of women's hockey here in Canada. We've never had something like this. So the fact that exists is pretty great. But honestly, Jonathan, about a week ago, around exactly this time, I was just figuring out that this was going to happen. You know, obviously there have been lots of talks, but this was really the confirmed moment, and it felt pretty surreal to know that this is happening. We're moving forward. So it's still sinking in for me, even though I don't really have much time to let it sink in, because before we know it, we're gonna be on the road. And actually, that they play the first regular season game is in Regina. I live about 2.5 hours away from Saskatoon, where the U of S Huskies is based. So every game is a bit of an away game for me, but I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. So when do things fire up for you, and are you already kind of cramming in the homework to get prepped and ready for the opener?
100%, Jonathan. That's exactly what I'm doing. And this weekend, especially, I'm going to really get settled in. I was joking with a friend of mine because a lot of people I know are having babies, and they do this thing that's called nesting, where they make casseroles and do that's what I'm doing. I'm making freezer meals for when I have to hit the road. So that's sort of how I'm viewing this. This is my baby. I'm very excited about it. But lots of homework. My big thing is I always want to be prepared, obviously, going into this. And there's a lot of things I need to get acquainted with, not the least of which is these great athletes and their stories. And some of them are already just so inspiring. We have a fifth year student coming back, and actually last year would have been her fifth year at the university, and then she wouldn't have been able to play because of the pandemic. And she decided to go get her master's in nursing. So she was on the front lines of the pandemic helping getting her master's so that she could then have her fifth and final year this season. That's something special. So to be able to call that for her is going to be amazing.
Absolutely. A lot of great stories. And that's kind of a common theme that goes through everybody in sportscasting and in broadcasting. And an interesting note that I see with you is your main job, if you can call it that, is you're the morning news anchor for Global Regina. So you do the real news, as it were.
Yes,
and now you're jumping into telling the stories of the athletes and calling the games. So what are some of the, and I know the season hasn't started quite yet, but what are some of the similarities and some of the differences that you might be expecting when it comes to switching up, or I guess adding main news to now sports?
I'm so glad you asked that, Jonathan. I think what's going to be great about, and I know we're going to talk about it a bit more, but the Huskies fan app, or Husky fan app rather, is it's going to be a platform that's very mixed media. And so part of my work is writing stories about what's happening when we're on the road, but not just about the game, right? Like getting in there with the players and the coach and bringing those human stories, especially for the women's side. I feel like that's sometimes what we're lacking a bit, and to have that opportunity is huge. So that's part of it. And I think no matter what, the story of what we're going through in the province we're in Saskatchewan, is the story of coming back from a year of everything being canceled, coming back through, I mean, we're going through a fourth wave right now. So COVID dominates every newscast that I'm talking about, has for a year, and I've lost track of time, but every single day. And I think that part of it is really what I want to focus on, is the what's next, that hopeful aspect. And of course, being honest about where we're at. I know it's a very young team coming in, lots of new skaters, but that's not necessarily something that head coach Steve Cook hasn't dealt with in the past. He certainly has, but it's going to be an interesting start, especially because I know everyone's rearing to go. I can't imagine just being and waiting and trying to get going right away.
Yeah, having experience covering, and a lot of friends who have been inside the Western Hockey League, I can know from that experience just the kind of excitement that they're having right now for their new season to start up. And they did have a portion of the season last year, but it was very abnormal with 24 games at hub centers. And this year looks like it's going to be much more normal. So I feel like I can understand that level of excitement a little bit from that side. So from this press release that Husky Athletics put out recently, the Husky fan app that you mentioned is recently launched with a website. And it looks like every game for women's hockey, among others, will be on that Husky fan app. And then there'll be a game of the week on radio, on AM radio across Saskatchewan. Is that, do I have that all right? And is there any more that you have to add?
No, you got it totally right. And the great thing about that game of the week is we are going to make sure that it's split between, the women's coverage, men's coverage. I mean, the men's side's so exciting too. We've got Mike Babcock actually tonight making his big debut with his hometown team. So, I mean, that's amazing, right? We're having that increased exposure there. So it's exciting on the men's side. It's so exciting on the women's side. And I think there's just so many stories to be told, as mentioned, and that app is going to allow that to happen. What I know you may have mentioned it, and maybe I've already If I missed it, I'm sorry, but everything is also going to be archived. And I think that's something to be said too, because trying to find some of those games and the people, the Husky fans are so like, they're really into it. So when we want to bring new people in, but we also want to make sure that those who want to access it at a different time can do that too.
Now, what's kind of your background as far as sports fandom and getting into sports broadcasting? Are you born and bred Saskatchewan?
Oh no, that's a good question though. Um, it's oh gosh, I'm like, how much time do we have? No, so I'm from South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa. I
Okay.
lived there for 10 years before moving to Winnipeg, and so I grew up very much rugby. Rugby was life. I mean, I was a kid, obviously, when the '95 South African team won the Rugby World Cup, and just I remember my house was just full of loud Italian people. I'm a big mix. So, I mean, and also the Italian side. So, love of soccer. You just get exposed to all of this. Then you come to Canada. I'm 10 years old. Everyone's talking about ice hockey. I mean, I knew a little bit about it. I wasn't. It's not like it was brand new, but I had never ice skated before. I was way behind the curve with that. But so you learn these things, and okay, this is interesting. I like try curling and try different things, but I personally always gravitated towards the artistic side. I got into dance and cheerleading and spent 10 years traveling as an aerial acrobat. That's a whole story for another time. But where I'm going with this is I've always been very into sports and I like the idea of it. But it was interesting because coming up, I went to a communications and broadcast and journalism program for 4 years in Winnipeg. And the sports thing seemed like it just wasn't meant for me. Like it was just one of those worlds that was just there, and if I wanted to do something with it would be a hobby or it would be something else. And I just kind of kept finding opportunities to get into it. One of my first gigs was with Shaw TV. So for folks who don't know what that is, it's like community access television. So we are in every rink covering curling or covering hockey or covering, oh gosh, we did some really fun basketball events too. And that's what got me hooked on it. And then I got to do everything. I got to do the graphics, like the bug, the hosting and camera work. And so you start to just get exposed to it. And then from there, I kept with radio and television. I was really news focused. That was my whole thing. And it all changed for me when I was in a very cold rink in North Battleford, but not an ice rink, just rink, no ice, watching roller derby for the first time. And I went, this is the coolest sport ever. And I remember like listening to the in-house announcers and going, they don't know what the heck they're talking about. I could do a better job than them. And it was just such a weird little moment. And then before I knew it, I was in that world. I actually am a roller derby skater. And then I got hooked on the broadcast, and that really took it from there. I was able to travel all around the States, and my last big international event was right before the pandemic really settled in Saskatchewan. We came back from Philadelphia. Philadelphia's got a really good derby scene there. So, and that's where I got the play-by-play bug, because roller derby, I know it's not necessarily your sort of mainstream sport, but they've been doing female play-by-play callers, female broadcast teams, and not only female, trans, non-binary. Like it's such an inclusive sport. I mean, in that sport, we actually adhere to acknowledging people's pronouns. So when we go and deal with the different athletes, we're acknowledging that, and we're making sure when we're calling, we're saying that. And so it's a whole different, world, and it's a good world, because that's I feel that is where we're headed, right, with sport and where we're going. But I'm on a tangent. So
Absolutely.
basically,
No.
what I'm trying to say is, as much as I've always thought that door was closed, the door is open, and this example is a really good one. So I've been exposed to hockey through my reporting work. I love it. I just enjoy watching it. It's a really good time. But this is going to be new for me, Jonathan, for sure.
No, and I love the variety and the diversity that you have just in your sports background. Seems like you've been introduced and have experience in a whole lot of different things that are very different sports. And I know a lot of times for young broadcasters, they have their sport. They dream of calling in the NHL. They dream of getting to Major League Baseball. But how, kind of from your own experience that you've lived, how valuable is that for young sportscasters starting out to get your fingers on everything, try different stuff? How important is that to get a variety of experiences?
I'll use the example of just last week, again around this time or just later than this. I was calling a marathon for the first time. It's a lot of fun. If you've never done that, there's just something about it. Just the runners coming in and you get to announce them, and it's a really big deal, and it's a lot of energy involved there. But what I'm getting at is it just open yourself up to those experiences. It's not for everybody. I do understand that it's hard to get to know every sport that intimately and to know the rule set. I really enjoyed the guest Jake, who was just on, talking about that. Like, you need to know your rules, you need to know the language, you need to know the general feeling about it. But being closed off is very hard, and especially Canada is so rich with really great sports opportunities. But depending where you are geographically, like here in Saskatchewan, if you were to take sports and run with it, you're going to need to be a multi-sport caster, just because the opportunities, right? You're spread really thin. That being said, though, we're seeing more and more people being able to do that and creating the other content on the off season, the outside thinking that's happening here. It's really amazing. I didn't even touch on the fact that of course, I got to work with the Saskatchewan Rush, and that really put the bug in it for me. The only reason I think I didn't mention it because I wasn't a play-by-play, but sideline reporter, in-game host for the first season, and then their television host, and we did a whole TV series just about players' stories, and it was such an incredible experience. I quit my job. I quit my stable job in news and decided to do it because I thought, you know what, if I'm going to give the sports thing a go, I need to do this. And then as the chips fell, everything kind of worked out that when the pandemic hit, I was in a pretty stable job again, working in news. And thankfully that was the case, because I would have been, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people at the time, right? Without work
Absolutely.
in the sports world. So
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. In the past, we've had on Ryan Flaherty, who
yes.
has been the play-by-play voice for Saskatchewan Rush games, and I think back when you were doing it, it was on BR Live.
Yeah.
So I believe you two were on the crew at the
Yes.
same
Oh,
time.
Ryan is
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, we were so fortunate that we got to do it. Ended up not being as many games as we would have liked because our season got cut short, but he's always been great, and he's also part of the Global News family. He's up in Saskatoon, of course, as a sports reporter. So it's just such a small world, and I love that part, when I get to anchor in the morning and I get to say, "Hey, Ryan Flaherty's reporting." It's pretty sweet. Pretty cool moment.
Absolutely. And we had a few more minutes here before we let you go, Daniela. But I wanted to get into one more conversation as it ties
Sure.
back into what we were talking about off the top. Your job calling Saskatchewan women's hockey coming up this season, and their launch of the Husky Fan app for women's hockey and other sports. And I just wanted to expand that out a little bit and see what your thoughts are on the broader conversation around the progression of women's sports and even women in sportscasting. In recent news, somewhat recent news, we've seen the National Women's Hockey League rebrand to the Premier Hockey Federation. In other sports, of course, you see how big the WNBA has gotten. What are your thoughts when you see the developments around women's sports, and where do you think we're going with it?
Well, honestly, we're going even further, right? That's the exciting part about it. I said today to a friend of mine, we're not at the beginning, but we're not at the middle even yet, right? So we're in that sweet spot of getting there, and it is going to take time. And of course, every sport is different. I would just in the big tennis hype, right? Layla, and I mean, wow, tennis, the tennis stars, the female, like, come on. I mean, people, that's a spectacle, right? So I think the biggest thing is the more money and the more attention we can give it in that sense, the more it's going to build. And I think we can't expect only grassroots love of things to propel it to the place that other sports are at. And we know that. I mean, there's just been such a head start with a level of investment that meant that male sports have had. And that's just the way it is, right? That's just history. So now it's building that up. And then, of course, you have to look region by region when it comes to the sports casting side. I'm really excited by what we're seeing here in Canada and in the States, too. I mean, Lisa just got that great gig with the Milwaukee Bucks. How amazing is that? You know, we're seeing it. It's great. So, yeah, I think it's just going to be a matter of taking that time, getting that investment, and then making sure that when we look at the who's watching side of it, we bring women into that conversation too, because I think one of the toughest things, women love sports, but are they watching women's sports too? You know, and it's not just the men. We have to get everybody kind of in that frame of mind, and then of course make it an experience that they won't forget. So I guess I'm talking all over the place, but really, Jonathan, I'm excited. I'm excited about where we're headed. Of course, there's work to do. There's work to do to bring in other groups that have been left marginalized and their voice is not in. There's the cultural aspects of things, like the Punjabi cast for hockey is wonderful, right? Like that's what we need. We need to connect with communities and bring that into the discussion too. So we are definitely headed on the right track. I'm excited, and hopefully we just get some more women out there knowing that play-by-play is for them too.
Absolutely, and a couple of more names I wanted to make sure that I entered into that to that conversation. The recent announcement of TNT's talent roster for their coverage of the NHL this season includes Jennifer Botterill as a contributor, former Canadian national women's hockey player. She was on the crew at Sportsnet for a while, and now she's on the TNT crew. And of course, last season, Leah Hextall became the first woman to call play-by-play in the NHL. So what is that? What do you think that does for young girls watching the NHL, whether it be dreaming of playing or dreaming of doing what you're doing, calling games now? What do you think that influence does?
It makes that dream so much more real and so much more possible. I really can't stress enough that door really feels closed when you don't see that reflected at all, or you see the same setups reflected. If you know what I'm trying to say, like the same, okay, we have women, but they're relegated to this role, or they do this one thing. And that's great. I mean, the heck, that's fantastic. But we got to start diversifying the roles. And so just to have, I mean, Leah Hextall too, I grew up, well, I shouldn't say I grew up watching her. I wasn't that much, I wasn't that young, but you know, she's got the tie-in to where I'm from too, and to see her on the desk as a sports, I guess at the time a sports anchor, and then developing into where she's at today. It's always cool. It's so great to see that, and just to know that it's not only possible, but it's respected, and those opportunities are now opening further for other people down the line, whether it's myself or, you know, hopefully somebody who is thinking about it right now and maybe they haven't decided what they want to do yet when they leave school one day. It's an option.
Absolutely. Well, great stuff, Daniella. Thanks so much for coming on with us tonight. I was thrilled that you would come on and talk about your new job coming up, and I thought those were important conversations to have there. So I'm thrilled that you would do this with us.
Oh, of course, Jonathan, anytime. And I know Jake extended this too, but I'll say it as well. If you ever want to chat women's sports or anything, really anything else, I'm always here for that. So
Absolutely. And when the season kicks off for the Huskies, combining that with your job as morning news anchor and then calling games, I'm not sure if most of those games are at night. Those are going to be some long days.
It will be, but you know what? I've figured it out. The other thing too is that this season is a shortened one, so in terms of adjusting, it's all happening on weekends. But as I said, I'm in the nesting process. I'm baking
Yep.
casseroles. I'm, getting everything set. But it is a lot. In fact, that's a lot of the prep too. Not only the notes on the game, but how am I going to drive time and all of that. But hey, when you love something this much, I mean, when I was working with the Saskatchewan Rush, I was also commuting. My job was in a city that wasn't where I was living. So hey, I'll do it.
Yep.
I'm excited. Yeah.
Yep. Fantastic. All right. Thanks so much for doing this. And we definitely won't be a stranger going forward. So thanks for this, and enjoy the season.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Have a great night.
All right, we'll go to one more break here on Behind the Mic. I will be back after the break to wrap up another show here for another week on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions. And one more time, welcome back to Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions. Jonathan Hodgson with you to wrap up another week. Great show tonight, talking hockey with Jake Baskin and Daniella Pontechelli. Many thanks to both of them for coming on. Check them out. Jake Baskin doing great work at a number of different spots while he attends Dean College in Massachusetts. And Daniella Pontechelli, who is just about set for her first season as play-by-play voice at the University of Saskatchewan for the women's hockey program. You can check her games out on the Husky Fan app and on radio in the province of Saskatchewan. So many thanks for both of them for coming on, and thanks to you for tuning us in wherever you've been watching from. Thanks for making us part of your Friday night. We always appreciate it, and before we let you go for another week, we'll remind you to check us out online at astvproductions.com. That's where you can find all our live shows and archives and our live game broadcasts. We're also on Facebook, where we simulcast, and further updates are on Twitter and Instagram as well. So for my guests, Jake and Daniella, this is Jonathan Hodgson saying thanks, and we'll talk to you again next Friday.